Hi everyone, this is a video to cover the project assessment for the developing small scale applications. So I just plan to talk through all the documents like we would have done had we been in the class, and then if anyone's got any questions then you can post on our discussion forum. So first of all, having a look at where the information is located on Moodle. So if you scroll down beyond the test assessment, you'll see that there is a project documentation folder. Now the idea is this is supposed to take a few weeks obviously for you guys to complete. I don't expect it will take you 5 full weeks, but we've got that time should we need it. So if you have a look in the folder, you'll see that there's quite a lot of documentation there. There is a set of documents here which I'm going to talk through, and in addition to that there is all the templates that you've already looked at and used for the car hire mini project. So that's just the blank templates that you need to fill in, and same, that's all just the blank tests and logs. So we won't cover those today, we'll just cover the project related documentation. So the first thing I'm going to look at is the scenario, basically to set the scene for the project. So the scenario is that the SQA recently restructured the Higher National Education Framework, and therefore they decided it'd be a good idea to commission an application that would help students to try and determine what all their possible progression routes are based on their results. So the idea is they want an application where students can enter their marks for their core units for their HNC, and then the application will take an average of those marks, and based on the average they will then be able to calculate what their next steps are, as in their next year of study. So if I just scroll down here, that basically just talks through what I've mentioned. The average of the 5 core units is taken, and based on that average we have these 4 possible progression options. So if they get an average score, a low average score of between 0 and 49, then their progression option is option 4, which basically translates to there is no guaranteed progression. We recommend that they just continue with their HNC and try and get more units, because they don't have any other opportunities with that result. If their average score is between 50 and 69, then their progression is option 3. And it means that they will be allowed to progress on to the HND networking course or the HND software development course. If they get a higher score, 70 to 79, then they get option 2, which would allow them to progress straight into the second year of an appropriate degree programme, assuming of course that they complete their HNC. And then finally, if they get a score of 80 or more over their average, then they will get progression option 1, which again allows them to progress straight into second year of the degree programme, but there's also the possibility of company sponsorship as well. So the core units that are involved in the calculation are these ones here. So these are the core units for your HNC that you guys should recognise. So basically the application has to ask them for the marks for each of these units. The marks are out of 100, and it will take an average of those, and then based on the average, as we discussed, it will be able to calculate the different options. So that's the general scene setter for the application. I'm now going to look at the project instructions document. I'm just going to load that one up. So this is an instruction. So basically, just to kind of clarify the reason for doing this project, it covers the 3 outcomes. So outcome 1 is covered by multiple choice, and the other 3 outcomes are covered by this project. So basically it involves designing an app, implementing the app, and testing the app. So all of those are covered within this project. We've already looked at the project brief. So just to sort of explain, the SQA use a contractor called Next Rung Limited to handle all their software type stuff. So Next Rung Limited are the ones who have subcontracted to us. So we are the ones that are going to create the application on the behalf of Next Rung, and Next Rung will then pass on to the actual SQA. So what are you going to be given? So you're going to be given a full requirement specification, which obviously you must implement to exactly. Remember, it's a binding contract, and we're also going to give you a navigation chart as well. So although you're going to be able to design your individual windows, there will be a structure, a navigation structure imposed on you that you have to follow. So as a solution provider, you're going to have to basically, at the end of the day, provide a fully implemented, fully tested application that meets the criteria of the requirement specification. And obviously it goes without saying, good programming practice is really important. This is what you need to submit. This is a sort of summary of all the stuff that has to be submitted. You'll see in a minute that I've also created a separate checklist, just because it's easier to have a tick list to go through. But this sort of summarises what you need. So you need to basically provide designs for all of the windows. All the documentation we've talked about before. So as well as the design, you need to provide the object identifier list for each window. So that's the document that you describe everything that you've dragged and dropped onto the window, and also the data item identifier list. And that's a document that lists all of the variables that are present in the code behind file for the window. When you're actually implementing the application, you must consider the following. You have to make sure you use appropriate scope of variables. So that basically means no global variables, but you guys are good at that anyway. We've always followed good programming practice and avoided that. You'll need to demonstrate the ability to use arithmetic, logic and Boolean operators. That's going to happen naturally because you've got to calculate an average, and then you've got to look at that average to decide what progression route. You have to use control structures. Again, you're going to have to do that. So you will be using things like potentially loops, if statements, etc. Using arrays. So you've got exam marks that you need to store. You've got 5 of them, so you can put them into an array. Range of event handlers. Again, that's going to happen naturally. So for each window, you're going to have to handle any of the interactive events. So most of these I would expect will be button clicks. Some of you might have list boxes as well. This one's important. You do need to use at least one try-catch. So remember, the try-catch is what we use to try and make our programs more robust and handle the errors rather than letting the program crash. Best way to implement the try-catch would be to use it to handle empty text boxes. And we've done lots of examples of doing that in the past. So again, that shouldn't be an issue if we look back at previous exercises. You have to be able to pass data between methods and windows. So in our case here, we are going to demonstrate the ability to share data between windows using a data class. It has to be modular, so obviously that's going to happen again naturally. You've got your separate event handlers. It will use standard libraries. You've got all your libraries that are included at the top of the file. And importantly, and this is really important, you have to comment your code. Okay, that is definitely a requirement. Once you've done the implementation, you'll do the testing. So you'll need to complete all the test logs. And yeah, that's pretty much everything. But a full list is available in the student submission checklist. So let me just jump to that just now so I don't forget to show you. So student submission checklist is on Moodle, and I'm not going to talk through it just now. Basically it looks like this. So it shows you Windows designs, one for each window, object identifier list, one for each window. So as long as before you submit it, you can go through and tick each of these boxes. Okay, really, really important. So make sure you do this checklist before you hand in any code. Now this is an open book assessment, so you can use any previous code, you can use any resources, but remember it still has to be your own work. If we've got any suspicion that it's been copied, then obviously it won't be accepted, and we will follow the plagiarism guidelines for how we handle that. So please make sure you do submit your own work. Ask questions if you're stuck. Okay, that's really, really important. The deadline is week 8, which is the 28th of April. So you do have quite a long time to do this. If you want to submit it earlier, that's absolutely fine. But try and get it for round about that date. That would be no later than the 28th, just so we can have time, excuse me, time for feedback and remediation. Okay, so that was the project instructions. So we've looked at the scenario and the project instructions. Okay, the one that's important, requirements spec. So this is all the nitty gritty and the real detail of what needs to be in the actual application. So the usual requirements spec starts off with who the client is. So remember, these guys are working on behalf of the SQA, so that's who we are going to be communicating with. Smart Apps, this is us. We are Smart Apps Solutions Limited. And we know we've got to provide Next Rung with a WPF application that's going to allow students to determine their possible progression routes. So this document will go through each individual feature that has to be in the application, and it will do it by describing each feature for each separate window. So although you can design the window, you must adhere to the features for each window. If you want to put extra stuff in, that's absolutely fine, but as a minimum you must include what is in this specification. So the application as a whole is going to provide three main windows effectively. It's going to have a start window, it's going to have a HNC computing window to allow students to enter their HNC computing marks, and then it's going to have the progression possibility window, which is basically the results window that shows them what their options are. So it's not a huge application. Obviously everything needs to be easy for the user, so a nice user interface, nice and simple, everything's well labelled, it's nice and clear. So now we're going to go through each window one at a time. Before we do that, actually, I'm going to show you the navigation chart, because I think that would probably help to put things into context. So again, we're giving you this navigation chart, so this helps quite a lot to be able to see the overall structure. So you can see there's the three windows at the top. Start navigates to the computing window where it will gather the exam marks or unit marks, and then it navigates to the results window. Now you'll notice we've got these extra windows here. The idea of this application is we have to show that it can be extended. This is a pilot currently only for the computing department for HNC computing, but we would like to extend it to HNC interactive media and also business management. So the idea is these two windows here will be created, but they will have no functionality. That's why they're called stub windows, so they don't do anything. Effectively, when you navigate, you will be able to navigate to these windows. When you do navigate to these windows, you can just have a message on them saying something along the lines of under construction. You also must be able to navigate back, okay? So all that will be on these windows is a message saying under construction and a back button. So these don't have any of their own functionality. So the main functional windows are these three along the top. Right, let's go back and look at the start window. So back to the requirements specification. Start window, this is what we want it to do. It has to have a start title. It has to, on the window, have a brief description of what the application is doing, so just a text block. Then it has to offer some way of the user to enter their full name. It's up to you if you want to make it first name, surname separate, or just one entry. Then it has to allow them the opportunity to enter their candidate number. From now on, I'm just going to refer to the candidate number as the SCN for short. So the SCN number has to be entered, so again a text box, and this is important. Your code has to validate this number, so it has to validate it to make sure that it consists of 9 digits. Now what I would advise is that we don't need to process this as a number. It's not going to be used in a calculation, so I would advise you leave this as a string. If you leave it as a string, so take it out the text box, which will be a string anyway. If you store it as a string, you'll be able to use the dot length method to calculate how many characters it has. So say the string was called SCN, you could then do SCN if SCN dot length less than 9, and then pop up a message box to say it's invalid. So top tip, keep it as a string. So enter a name, enter a candidate number, and then they have to be able to choose their course. It's up to you. List box, you might want to use buttons, your choice. When once you've done all the inputs, so the name, the candidate number and the course choice, you're then going to have some way of submitting all that data. So pretty much a button, a submit button or a continue button. When that button's clicked, or for the navigation, before it navigates, it has to make sure that all of these inputs have been provided. So if anything's blank, or if a choice hasn't been made, it does not navigate to the next page. Okay, and that's really, really important. If they've missed anything, pop up a message and tell them. And again, we had examples of this. If you look at the car hire, I've shown you how to do that for the list boxes. So have a look at the videos for that, or the code. So that is the main window. So now we're going to move on. So let's assume the user has picked computing. So they're going to move on to the computing window. So the computing window, again, it's got to have this title. Okay, it's a requirement. At the top, you're going to display the user's full name and whatever program they've picked, which in this case obviously is going to be HNC Computing. So that full name is going to have came from their entry on the first page. So you're going to need a data class to share that information. So just like the car hire, you're going to have to use a data class, which is going to be your central store. So right now in that central store, you're going to have the full name. So the main page will put the full name into the central store so that the computing page can pull it back out again and use it. As well as the name and the program of study, sorry, I should say that this page will also need to put in the program of study, so whatever course they're studying will need to go into the store. So it'll pull out the name out of the store and the course out of the store and display them on this window. Underneath that, there's going to be the 5 units, and I guess a text box is really the best option here for each of them to allow the user to enter a mark. So beside each of these labels, a text box that they can enter a mark. Now, again, these have to be validated. The mark has to be within the range of 0 to 100. So again, before you navigate, you're going to have to check that all the marks are valid. And if not, then you're going to have to tell the user. We hint again here, remember text boxes, strings, these are numbers. So when you pull the data out of the text box, you're going to have to convert it to an integer so that you can then look at that as a number. Once you've entered all the values, you need again some sort of submit button, and again, same deal. When you click the submit button, it will need to validate that all the marks are in the correct range. It'll need to make sure nothing's been left blank. If there's a problem with anything, it will not navigate, okay? However, if they've entered in everything correctly, then it will take them to the next page. So if we look at our navigation chart, next page is effectively the results page, where it tells us what the progression possibilities are. So let's go back. Progression possibility window, again, it's got its own title, which has to be progression possibility. On this window, it's going to display the user's average mark. So that means we're going to have to share data from this page. Now, it doesn't really make sense to share all the marks individually because this page only needs to know the average. So what I would recommend is you actually calculate the average on the HNC computing page and just store the average mark in the data store. There's no point in storing all these separate marks, okay? So it'll be able to get the average mark from the data store, and then based on that, it will display the user's progression option. So again, remember that's using the categories here. So whatever category it falls into, this is the option that must be displayed, and also the description. So both of these have to be displayed, option and description. Okay, so it'll display the option first, and then it'll display what the description of that is. In addition to the progression route, I also want you to add a link to the UCAS site. The easiest way to do this is to add a button, and in the event handler code for the button, so when they click on the UCAS button, then it will automatically take them. This is the line of code you need to do that. So in your event handler for your UCAS button, put this line of code, and that basically tells the application to go and launch an external web site with ucas.com. And then obviously they need some kind of return button to go back to the start window, because if we look at the navigation chart, they can go all the way back to the start. So we need that button as well. Okay. So that's all the requirements for each of the windows. As I said, that's the minimum. So if you want to add more stuff, then go ahead. I'd recommend though you focus on getting the core stuff there first. Get it all up and working using the data class to share the data. That's really important. There is really detailed video on how to do that. If you look at the car hire application mini project on Moodle, you'll find the link to that video. And then after you've implemented the basics, if you want to add extra, then by all means you can go ahead. Non-functional requirements, each window should look the same. So if you are applying some colors or special formatting or fonts, then please make sure it's consistent throughout. It should have a corporate look and feel. There's no requirement to change colours and fonts. That's extra stuff, but if you want to, then feel free, you can go ahead. As long as the core functionality works, that's the main thing. So this is all the usual stuff that you would have in a standard requirement spec. So you need to think about training, support, timescales. Obviously, these are not relevant to us because we're not in the real world. It's just to kind of keep it consistent with what it would look like. And then you've got your signatures down the bottom. Okay, right. So we've pretty much covered everything here. Yep, we've talked about instructions, requirement spec, scenario, checklist, navigation chart. Yeah, so that covers everything. Again, the project documentation's all there. What I'll do is, as a reminder, these 2 PowerPoints are really good at explaining how to go about setting up your application and how to complete the project documentation. I'll copy these down into this area as well, just so that you can find them easier. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about the project. Obviously, people might have some questions. I fully expect that, so there will be a forum made available, and I ask that you do use the forum so that if people do have questions, I'm sure you'll be one of many people with the same questions, so it just makes it easier for me just to answer it once rather than separate emails. Okay, hopefully you guys found this helpful, and keep an eye on the forum. Thank you.